Welcome to Module 3, which runs from Monday, February 8th to Sunday, February 21st. Note that this module is of 2 weeks duration, unlike the previous modules, which were one week duration for each. In Module 2, we closely examined concepts in the course that were related to evil, combating evil, and the critical issue of forgiveness. And as I mentioned in my lecture notes on Module 2, Johnson tends to be quite earnest about the spirituality dimensions of this topic, which is really important. And I hope you waded through that dimension of it to get to some of the essential applications that he's addressing. Chapter 4 especially tends to be somewhat controversial and even dark, owing to the approach used and the discomfort that some of you may feel recollecting an experience of evil in your own lives, and also how and when we deal with forgiveness. Although difficult, I believe the reading provoked thinking about some of the most disturbing events in recent decades. For example, the LIBOR Scandal, the case we discussed. One of the major challenges to good governance is, in fact, combating evil and doing the right thing. The theme for this module is ethical standards and strategies. And in this module, we will discuss major ethical perspectives and moral reasoning and problem-solving strategies that can be applied to ethical choice making. We will also examine ethical influence tactics and normative leadership theories. Our topics for discussion, as you can see, are ethical perspectives, ethical decision-making behavior, exercising ethical influence, and normative leadership theories. As I've mentioned, our activities are the case study 2, case study 3, and company selection for the final project. Readings chapter 5 to 8 in Craigie Johnson. And I've also posted several optional readings. As I've been saying, you are not required to read them, but they are essential. So at least skim through them and it will give you more leverage in discussing the cases and understanding some of the concepts further. So the first topic we'll discuss is ethical perspectives, and that's I believe chapter 5 of our reading. We will look at some of the classical theories that underline historical and contemporary understanding of general ethical perspectives. The bent is somewhat philosophical, but as indicated in the syllabus, this is critical to balancing the applied nature of our course. I invite you to read through this chapter carefully, as it can help significantly to assist you in understanding and perhaps to reconsider how you approach moral decision-making. I encourage you to think about this in the context of leading an organization and the governance principles that we have been discussing in our case studies. The frameworks offered are certainly not exhaustive, but they are steeped in tradition, scholarship, and a good deal of thoughts, some of it over centuries. Again, this chapter provides an opportunity for introspection and further thought associated with your own place in the principled leadership landscape. This complements some of the work from our last module, wherein we looked at the leader's character and how the way can be easily lost. So we'll talk about the various ethical decision-making issues. Like the first one you read about is utilitarianism. And it's based on the premise that critical choices should be based on their consequences. Utilitarianism is attempting to do the greatest good for the greatest number of people. Utility can be based on what is best in a specific case or what is generally best in most contexts. That's the rule utilitarianism. Immanuel Kant talked about what he describes as the categorical imperative. Do what is morally right, no matter the consequences. And that's what's developed into the deontological ethics. Deontological ethics, ethicists argue that we ought to make choices based on our duty. And according to Kant, who was born in 1724, what is right for one is right for all. Respect for persons. People are the end and not the means to an end. Encourage capacity of others to think and choose for themselves. Then Rawls' justice as fairness, also some who was born in the 20th century, dealing with inequality in society based on equality. We should follow these principles of justice and build them into our social institutions. And two main principles were discussed in the readings. And the first one is each person has an equal right to the same basic liberties that are compatible with similar liberties for all. And the second principle is that social and economic inequalities are to satisfy two conditions. The first condition is that they are to be attached to offices and positions open to all under conditions of fair equality of opportunity. And the second one is that they are to provide the greatest benefit to the least advantaged members of society. And he talks about the veil of ignorance. Set aside considerations of wealth, education, gender, and race when making choices. Doing so will benefit the least advantage. Dewey's pragmatism is ethics as inquiry. Pragmatism was the dominant philosophical movement in the US from the Civil War through to the World War II. You use philosophy to resolve practical problems. Scientific methods can be applied to solving human dilemmas. You develop an hypothesis, you test it, modify it, conclusions subject to revision, experiment through the use of moral imagination. Then altruism, love of neighbor, is the ultimate ethical standard. Our actions should be designed to help others, whatever the personal cost. Concern for others promotes healthy social relationships. Researchers from social psychology, economics, political science, and other fields have discovered that altruistic behavior is more often than not the norm, not the exception. And ethical leaders focus on the needs of followers. Then the ethic of care, which is also very interesting. The 5 key components of ethic of care is it focuses on the importance of noting and meeting the needs of those we are responsible for, our followers. Values, emotions, specific needs and relationships take priority above universal principles. Breaks down the barriers between the public and private spheres. Views persons as both relational and independent. Then the next topic is the ethical decision-making and behavior. So when we talk about ethical decision-making, we will look at some approaches to systemic decision-making by leaders. In other words, figuring out how to approach challenges and attempting to understand guidelines that can help in our thinking about the decisions we make and those we help others make. The models discussed are very interesting, and I encourage you to review them carefully and unpack them if possible in the context of a decision that you either had to make recently or are in the process, or you are in the process of making. So when we talk about the decision-making guidelines or format can help us make better ethical choices. Taking a systemic approach encourages teams and individuals to carefully define the problem, gather information, apply ethical standards and values, identify and evaluate alternative courses of action, and follow through on their choices. So the component of moral action are moral sensitivity, that's recognition, moral judgment, moral focus, and moral character. And these are nicely laid out in our readings. There are four decision-making format discussed by Johnson. There are several other decision-making models, as you may have seen through some of our courses. But these are the four which are closely related to ethical decision-making: the four-way method, the 5 timeless questions, the Lonergan-Baird method, and the four-square protocol. Then we'll talk about exercising ethical influence in chapter 7. We will look at ethical leadership as moral behavior and moral influence. Ethical leaders must set a moral example, maintaining high personal ethical standards. At the same time, they are responsible for the behavior of others, which means that they must encourage followers to behave morally. The chapter introduces the ethical issues surrounding 5 sets of important leader influence tools: compliance frames, compliance gaining, the communication of expectations, augmentation, and negotiation. Then the last topic for discussion under this module is normative leadership theories. We will closely examine concepts in the course that are related to what are referred to as normative theories of leadership. John Celia has edited a very interesting volume on this entitled Ethics, the Heart of Leadership, which I recommend to those of you who may have not seen it previously. The volume is not brand new, but contains additional wisdom and understandings around normative theories and specific behaviors of leaders. A lot of this were also discussed in OL 601. The Johnson chapter discussion offers helpful insights into the various theories that inform leadership behavior and the pros and cons of each of these. Once again, Johnson circles back to the followership question as well as to servant leadership, servant followership. In our readings for this module, he also offers some great personal insight tools at the end of the chapters. And as has been the past practice, I strongly encourage you to spend some time in the coming 2 weeks to go through these exercises, responding as carefully as possible since they are for your own insight only. I'm not grading them, but they are very helpful. I've done it all and I've really found them very helpful, and I encourage you to do so. So some of the leadership theories that Johnson talks are transformational leadership, which is the most popular and dominant leadership theory we have now. Then we have servant leadership, authentic leadership, authentic followership, aesthetic leadership, benevolent leadership, ethical leadership. These are not all the leadership theories we have. We have an alphabet soup of leadership theories, but these are some of the key and dominant ones, and we've talked about it throughout, especially in OL 601. We have 3 assignments for this module. The company selection. For the company selection, you are required to submit a 2-page double-spaced 12-point font, nicely crafted title, a short description of the organization and its main business lines, your reason for the selection of that company for your project, and at least 3 full annotated peer-reviewed scholarly journal citations of relevant references. I've received a couple of questions on annotated peer review, and I'll discuss it shortly. The company selected and the proposed title should be agreed to by all group members, and this is very important. It carries 25 points out of the total points for the entire project. When we talk about annotated bibliography, it's a list of citations to, excuse me, it's a list of citations to books, articles, and documents. In our situation, we are only looking at annotated bibliography for a minimum of 3 peer-reviewed citations, and each citation is followed by a brief, usually about 100 to 150 words, descriptive and evaluative paragraph. That is what is called annotation. You just don't copy what is in the article and submit or post the abstract. You use your own word. After you've read the article, you give about 100 to 150 words description of what the article is about, because the annotation aims to inform the reader of the relevance, accuracy, and quality of the resources cited. This link, the Purdue All link, gives examples of annotated bibliography, and I will encourage you to visit that. There are samples which are very good for the exercise we are doing. And I've given an example of annotated reference. So if you have like 3 references, the minimum you can follow this. This is my on-site article, and I've shown how to describe what is in the or the content of the article. We will talk about case study 2, blood bananas, which is very interesting. We all go to the malls, buy bananas, but we don't really pay particular attention to the brands. Banana is banana oil, but Chiquita is one of the popular brands we see, and the case study is very interesting, and I hope you enjoy discussing it. Then we have another one for week 4, which talks about COVID, and it's the ethical challenges that Smith Food had with regards to better paid workforce and some of the conditions under which they work. So this is basically what we need to do for this module. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to post it on Blackboard or send me an email if it's personal. Enjoy the module, keep safe, and stay well.